Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome Thursday, January the 18th, 2024. Appreciate you all tuning in. I'm Chris Phillips, your host of SEC Unfiltered, as always. I appreciate you all being here. I see Billy Cotton, Travi, Ethan K, Robbie Davis. What's going on? Also those in our Discord, also those on social media, wherever you're at, Facebook, X, Twitch, YouTube, you name it, guys. Again, thank you all so much for the continued love and support. Really do truly appreciate you guys being here. If you're on YouTube, be sure you smash that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well, which is every single day. We do this every single day, noon to 2 p.m. Eastern as well, taking your questions, comments, and your calls in our daily mailbag segment at the end of the show, 843-790-3377. We also talk an array of different topics, and we have a daily guest or two on every single show. So again, be sure you check us out right here every day. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and like I mentioned, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we're live and when new video content is released. Also, guys, head over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can check out the podcast at SEC Unfiltered everywhere you get your podcast. And, of course, guys, like I mentioned, all across social media. You can check us out, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we are there. Again, guys, thank you all so much for being here. Really excited, guys. A jam-packed show here on this Thursday, January the 18th. Is it time to hit the panic button in Tuscaloosa, right? Kalen DeBoer's era in Tuscaloosa off to somewhat of a rough start, an uneasy start is the nicest way you can put it, I think. We'll talk all about that, guys. Also, SEC basketball last night. Vegas was right? We talked about that game, LSU Ole Miss. The line felt weird. Bayou Bengals find a way to get it done, guys. We'll talk that game, everything else that happened on the hardwood. Also, guys, Texas's head coach, right? They're about to be in the SEC. Not quite there yet. Texas's head coach brought up the horns down gesture after their loss last night, saying it was classless. Called out the UCF players, went further in detail on that, why he believes it's a classless gesture. Is he right? Is he wrong? We'll talk more on that. And, of course, guys, like I mentioned, the daily mailbag segment, taking your questions, your comments, and your calls at 843-790-3377. I want you all to be part of the show. You can also call in, guys. Leave us your voicemails if you cannot call in from 1:30 to 2 or when we do our daily mailbag segment. We'll love to hear from you and you guys be part of the show. And we're about to kick off this show in just a moment with our good friend Brad Logan of Inside the Rebels. He talks all things Ole Miss Rebels as we get an update on the Rebs, the latest from Oxford, Mississippi. Again, guys, thank you all so much for being here. Appreciate you all tuning in. Really, really excited to chat with you all here on this Thursday. Also, guys, we're 29 days away from opening day. 29 days until toe meets rubber. I had somebody this morning that was confused, like toe meets rubber. A pitching mound, my friend. The rubber on the pitching mound, right? Toe meets rubber. Figure it out, okay? So, anyways, we're 29 days away. Really excited, guys. Had a great conversation yesterday that will probably air Monday of next week with Ryan Broninger over at TexAgs. Talked all things Aggies baseball. We're going to get as many SEC folks, team-specific SEC folks, as we can to talk about these different ball clubs in the SEC the week of opening day, guys. That is when I'll do my full SEC baseball season preview, predictions, all that good stuff. And, of course, we'll look ahead to the 2024 season. Really excited for that. But, guys, with that being said, again, we kick off this show in style. My good friend, Brad Logan, as he helps us talk all things Ole Miss Rebels, hotty toddy, gosh almighty. Lots of momentum down there in Oxford. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Brad Logan. Talking all things Ole Miss Rebels with our good friend Brad Logan. He's a contributor at Inside the Rebels on 24/7 Sports. He's also a podcast host on the Believe in Ole Miss podcast and also a co-host on Red and Blue Crew pod. He does a little bit of everything. Brad, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Always a pleasure. And like I mentioned to you off the air, it is a fun time to be an Ole Miss fan, and it's a fun time to talk Ole Miss Rebels, my friend. How are you?
It really is, Chris. Thanks for having me on, and congratulations on all of your early success branching out to the SEC. You've got a big fan in me, and so I wish you nothing but the best. It's right now the transfer portal are two words that have been said under Lane Kiffin's tenure over the last couple of years. They being Ole Miss, continue to hit the portal really hard. Just this morning at 6 a.m. Central, Pete Golding tweeted the Shark. Now we've got some thoughts on who we believe that might be. But obviously, they got the tight end transfer out of Virginia Tech yesterday. There are other recruits that are on campus this past weekend, and Oxford is completely snowed in. We're snowed in here about 30 miles south of Oxford. So right now, we're just kind of waiting to see who is going to be the new commit and possibly could be of the 25 class. But we think it possibly is probably going to be another transfer portal. It has been wild. But real quick, Chris, I think sure, recruiting is big in the transfer portal. Recruiting is big for the 25 season. But I think what Lane Kiffin, Pete Golding, Charlie Weiss, Randall Joyner, that entire recruiting staff, along with Kelvin Bolden, have done a phenomenal job not only recruiting the portal, recruiting high school kids, but recruiting their own roster. I think when Trey Harris came out, the wide receiver, and said he was going to stay, Ulysses Bentley has come out and said he's going to stay. We just heard from John Saunders Jr., who's going to stay the final year. They're calling it the final dance or the last dance of 24, similar to akin to what Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls did in the 1990s. And then all of a sudden you get Jackson Dart comes out, he's staying. The only person of significance that has left has been running back Quinshon Judkins. And sure, that's a big component of this offense. So I expect Ole Miss to try to fill that gap with another running back out of the portal. But yeah, pretty good news that you only lose one player of significance off a team that wins 11 games, the first 11 win program in program history.
Yeah, Brett, let's start there. You mentioned that because one thing that'll help you out, obviously, with momentum and the portal and recruiting is winning 11 games. And the first time, like you mentioned in school history, you close it out with that Peach Bowl win over the Penn State Nittany Lions, right? I mean, it's a feature game. Penn State is a brand, a big-time program. So that win was big for many reasons. But, I mean, you look back on the 2023 season, Brad, you lose 2 games to Alabama and Georgia, right? I mean, it was a great season in Oxford. And again, you covered that thing day in, day out. Just really quickly touch on the 2023 season that was, and then the significance of, again, you win 11 games, first time in school history. That's a significant feat and a significant achievement under head coach Lane Kiffin.
Well, oddly enough, a couple of plays that really stand out. That's of course the defensive stand against LSU when Ole Miss wins that game, 55-49, I believe. Another game that I'm reminded of is Randy Bond's field goal from Texas A&M comes up a little short after Xavier Harris, who was up for Special Teams Player of the Year from a couple of services. He blocks her, just barely tips that field goal, and Ole Miss beats A&M in another close one. They win all their close games this year, and when Ole Miss was able to beat Arkansas by 6 or 7 points in Oxford, another close one. Ole Miss was able to beat Mississippi State on the road by 10 points, but not before Ole Miss forces Mississippi State for a field goal, and the kicker Ferry's kick comes a little bit short. Everything that had to go right for Ole Miss during the season went right. All of the close games, and coming into the season, you look at you go back into history and look at Houston Nutt, you look at Hugh Freeze, you look at Matt Luke, you look at Billy Brewer. So many of those close games go the other way. So much so, Chris, that the moniker around Oxford and Ole Miss is "We are Ole Miss." And the team says that, or that's things that people say before the game. But it was a negative thing that people would say, well, we'll win the party. We'll just go to the Grove and hang out and have a good time. We may not win the game, but we always win the party. Nobody says that anymore. That has completely been eradicated from the program. Nobody walks around and says, well, we are Ole Miss. WAOM. That's the moniker, the hashtag that people, and you just don't see that anymore. And I think that's a credit to Lane Kiffin and the staff and the players about how well they've done this year. But those close games, to me, is what says how Lane Kiffin has changed the program, has changed the culture. And you can go back to the game a couple of years ago at Tennessee. That was the biggest game in Lane Kiffin's tenure to win on the road in the SEC. He was able to do that. And now we're a couple of years later, Ole Miss wins 11 games, and now probably, Chris, ranked in the top 10, maybe even close to the top 5 in some services leading into that 24 season.
Brad, speaking of Lane Kiffin, what's it like covering him on a day in, day out basis? Because I had my first ever opportunity to listen to Lane Kiffin. It was in person and really sit down and listen to him in a presser. It was in person last year's SEC Media Days. And, he's a guy that, in person, speaking to the media, he's going to speak his mind, but he's fairly subdued. I don't think it's anything over the top, if you will, just kind of looks like he's doing it because he has to, but he's electric on social media. I mean, it's like he's low-key trolling everybody else in the SEC. He's posting different things, right? When they were visiting South Carolina and visiting Juice Wells, they're posting the South Carolina golf cart, and you got Ole Miss staffers going back and forth with South Carolina staffers. Right now, he's tweeting, if you will, at Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze is probably never going to reply. But I mean, what is it like covering him? Because I mean, again, he's just, for somebody like in the content space, like it's got to be a ton of fun just kind of seeing what will Lane Kiffin say or do next.
He's nothing like his online persona. In a press conference setting, you talked about it in the SEC media days. I mean, he's just like that. He's very to the point. He does not deviate from the message, and excuse me, he's very similar to Nick Saban. He coached under Saban. I think he learned a lot about how to deal with the media. He doesn't smile very much. He doesn't laugh. Very few times he will make it some form of a joke. What we saw the post game of the Peach Bowl was the most I've seen him. I asked Caden Prescorn, who had 10 catches and led the team in catches, had a couple of touchdowns, would have had 3 touchdowns if they had not blown the whistle on that offsides of Penn State. And I was like, Caden, man, is there any game planning you guys did? I know you were healthy. It's the first time you've been fully healthy all year, but is there any game planning that you guys did against Penn State? And Lane, what did you take from the job that Prescorn had? I mean, he played great. Andy's coming back next year. That's got to be exciting for you. And while Caden was answering, he interjected and said, wait a minute. You didn't ask him about going pro. Now I've got to throw it to him 10 times. He's got to get 10 catches or he's going to go pro on me, which coming from Lane, that's a lot. I mean, when he interjects anything of substance that's not by the message, that's something we pay attention to. So he is, to answer your question, he's nothing like his online persona, nothing at all. And he's very by the book and does not disclose injuries. And it's real funny because Tyler Comas, who works with me, he'll say, I know you don't talk about injuries, but what about, for example, Micah Pettis was dealing with a lower body injury. What about Micah Pettis at left tackle? Do you expect him to play? He says, well, I'm not going to discuss injuries, but Micah Pettis is not going to play because of a lower leg injury. So he would actually answer the question anyway. So it's kind of funny, listen to some of those things. But yeah, he is a lot of fun to cover from the social standpoint. That's for sure.
Brad, you mentioned the retirement of Nick Saban and the fact that Lane Kiffin worked under Saban, and obviously Lane showing his respects to the GOAT on social media. He would do that a lot, by the way, throughout the season, and just talking about the GOAT that is Nick Saban. But with his retirement, right, the excitement in Oxford was already at a fever pitch. What is the mood now? First, I'll get your thoughts and your reactions, Brad, to the GOAT hanging it up. But I mean, what's the excitement level at now looking at 2024 where it's like, Alabama's still going to be chock full of talent, don't get me wrong, but I mean, all of a sudden, it's like the stars are almost aligning for Ole Miss going into 2024. And by the way, many other SEC programs that I think secretly, even if they're not, letting these feelings be known, I mean, I'm sure that there's fan base, the fan bases in Athens, Starkville, Fayetteville, Oxford. There's a lot of folks that are probably pretty happy to see Nick Saban head out the door. Your thoughts on the retirement and then the vibe around Oxford, what it means for Ole Miss, that maybe they don't have to deal with Nick Saban anymore.
Interesting about Nick Saban, Ole Miss, it'll be the first year Ole Miss does not play Alabama since 1991, and they've played them consecutively since then. So, I think everybody's kind of looking at that. But here's a stat for you, Chris. I don't think anybody's really thinking about. People don't realize Lane Kiffin is the 3rd or 4th tenured coach in the SEC. Think about that. Let that sink in for a moment. I mean, other than Kirby Smart, I think there are a couple more ahead of him. But other than those,
Stoops is the most tenured. That's the wild.
Mark Stoops, and so it's really maybe 3rd or 4th. So, but yeah, I mean that's interesting to know that Lane has been at Ole Miss when everyone is like, yeah, he'll stay a year or two and leave. I think now he's kind of settled in and waiting for that perfect job. Now, people were talking about Lane Kiffin in Alabama. I think Lane and Jimmy Sexton and his representation are smart enough to understand You don't want to be the guy that follows Saban. You want to be the guy that follows Saban. Because if DeBoer comes in and just does not do well and what goes 10-2 and maybe 9-3, they're like, let's get this guy out of here. It may settle things down a little bit for someone like a Lane Kiffin to come in a couple years down the road. But I've always thought, this is my personal opinion, that is the job that Lane Kiffin has always wanted. I don't know if Greg Byrne and his team wanted Lane Kiffin. I know there was not a lot of overtures one way or the other. His name was never brought up. And as we know now, he is not the coach at Alabama. So the question is if he continues to win at Ole Miss hosts a playoff game, something that they've never done, or obviously it'll be the first year that a team can do that. If they go on the road and they somehow make a national championship or they win a national championship, how does that change the mystique of Lane Kiffin? Is he hot? Is he the hottest commodity on the market? What happens at Alabama at that point? It just feels like that there are only a handful of jobs specifically that pay that Lane Kiffin would jump to in the college ranks. I think the NFL came calling that's another animal. But I do think that Alabama is definitely a job that's always been on his horizon, and probably just not the right timing for Lane Kiffin right now with the team that Ole Miss has coming back in 24.
And Brad, you mentioned the fact, and my mistake, that Ole Miss doesn't even play Alabama this year, and I'm still getting used to the fact we don't have East and West divisions, right? We've got
Right.
just one big conference. So Bama falls off the schedule, which I should have known that because last week we locked in way too early predictions. You look at, let's talk about really quickly, Brad, you look at this 2024 schedule. Again, we talk about stars aligning. There's no such thing as an easy schedule in the SEC.
Right.
But there is a manageable schedule. And I think Ole Miss has that. I mean, you look at this, you start out the first month of the season, Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern. That's a pretty good way to get things rolling. Your first SEC game is the Kentucky Wildcats. That's at home. Your road games are at South Carolina, who went 5-7 last year. At LSU will be tough, right? Anytime you go to Baton Rouge. You welcome Oklahoma to the SEC. You go to Arkansas. We know their problems. You get Georgia at home. You go to Florida. Again, will Billy Napier even be the head coach when Ole Miss sees the Gators? And then you close out with Mississippi State at home. I don't really feel like you could have asked for a much more favorable slate for what Ole Miss is trying to accomplish this season.
Yeah, I think you just look, and this year, Chris, Ole Miss was favored in every game but two, and it was Alabama and Georgia, and they lost those games.
Mhm.
Ole Miss will be favored in every game, I think, except Georgia, and maybe depending on what's happening at Oklahoma, we'll see about that. And then on the road at LSU, I think Oklahoma right now would be a push. I think LSU is probably a 3-point favorite at home, and then Georgia would probably be a 6 to 7 point favorite at Oxford. So I think at least Ole Miss is the underdog in 2 games, maybe more, depending on what happens with Florida. Otherwise, they're going to be a favorite in the remainder of their games. So if Ole Miss, goes chalk and goes 10-2, they're in the playoff. If you can start in the top 10 and don't move a lot and stay anywhere from, 11 until 8 and lose 2 games, then you give yourself a shot. And that's the beauty of the college football playoff. You don't have to worry about beating Oklahoma and beating Georgia if you can beat LSU, or vice versa. If you beat LSU on the road, you could give up one to Georgia or to Oklahoma. But the good news is you get Georgia and Oklahoma at home. And Ole Miss has been proven to have a really incredible home atmosphere over the last couple of years. I think they went 7-0 this year at home. So, it's a great opportunity for Ole Miss next year. The schedule, you're right, it aligns really well for this Ole Miss team, and it's a season to where Ole Miss fans have not had this type of excitement in the history of the program. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic by saying that. Anyone that's my age, I'm 47. I don't think anybody, in my age category that wasn't around in 1971, 72 for Archie Manning, or prior to that when the team won a national championship in the early 1960s under Johnny Vaught. Unless you're a part of that, there's never been any excitement like this.
Brad, let's get back to the transfer portal because, again, Ole Miss has been very, very active. I want to start, though, with the Quinshon Judkins thing. That one, to outsiders at least, was somewhat surprising. We now know, of course, he has committed and I think maybe even enrolled at Ohio State. Jackson Dart goes on his Instagram and posts something, a cryptic post to his story, which was quickly deleted. There was rumors of why it happened and what was going on. Can you fill us in on the Quinshon Judkins situation and just why he felt the need to hit the transfer portal?
Well, anytime you cover a program, you hear rumblings of instability at certain issues and that sort of thing. And sure, I mean, we heard there were issues, specifically in the Peach Bowl. I mean, there's video evidence of Jaden Williams looking down at Quinshon Judkins and shaking his finger and not helping him up. I mean, he's not doing that as a joke. There's obviously a reason for that. We see Caleb Williams. I'm sorry. We see Jaden Williams and also other offensive linemen get into it somewhat with Quinshon Judkins during the game because they're having issues with blocking schemes and that sort of thing. So that's evidence that there is something going on there. And then, of course, after Quinshon transfers, there's social media posts. And so just judging by things right in front of our face, there's obviously something there. I cannot verify that there's locker room issues. I cannot verify any of that. All I could do is just follow the breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs led me to believe that there was a locker room issue with Quinshon Judkins. So I don't know that Ole Miss is glad that he moved on because let's be honest, he's a phenomenal running back. He's someone that carried Ole Miss in the latter part of the year. He dealt with a rib injury earlier on against Tulane, against Georgia Tech, was not as effective as a running back. But boy, he really turned it on against Texas A&M, against Arkansas, and specifically took the game over against Mississippi State. So I thought he had a great game. I thought he played well in the Peach Bowl as well. So definitely going to be someone that is missed. But I think we'd probably be having our head in the sands if we didn't believe that there was an issue in the locker room. I think at the end of the day, both parties agreed to move on. And I think, Quinshon's moving on to Ohio State. He's going to have every eye in the nation on him. He'll have a great opportunity to get all the Heisman hype that you could imagine. I think the starting running back, Chris, came back, so I think there'll probably be a 1-2 punch there in Columbus for Coach Ryan Day. And yeah, I think both parties worked it out. But from an Ole Miss standpoint, I do think with Ulysses Bentley coming back, who's very talented, he'll be QB1. I'm sorry, running back 1. And then you've got a couple other guys. Kedrick Riscondo is a running back to be looking forward to. He's someone that Kevin Smith, the running back coach, really likes. But I do think Ole Miss will go to the portal and get an established running back at some point, maybe in the next window in May. But I expect Ole Miss to get one more running back before the season.
So, Brad, sticking with the transfer portal, let's talk some of these additions that Lane Kiffin has been able to reel in. I mean, the names range from guys like Walter Nolan, Princely Uman Tyler Barron, Juice Wells, Pooh Paul Jr., the linebacker from Arkansas, Logan Diggs, right? We just found out, by the way, you need a running back. He comes over from LSU to Ole Miss. Starting defensively, because they flashed this graphic during the Peach Bowl. I think what is really interesting, and I really commend Lane Kiffin, because a lot of times coaches will say something, and that's kind of all that happens, right? They just say it. Lane Kiffin said after the Georgia game, and he got kind of criticized for it, right? For just publicly coming out and saying that, and I'm paraphrasing, but we need better players. I mean, we need bigger bodies. We need to look like that on defense. In your opinion, your assessment, do you feel like Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels have gotten closer to that by these additions through the portal when it comes to the defensive side of the football, specifically getting the size, the speed, the type of players you need to succeed at the level that he was referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting right across from Lane when he said, I knew when I looked at their roster and I looked across the way, I knew we were in trouble. And he said, that's no indictment on our players. Our players play their tails off. It's just we were he basically said, we're in a different league than Georgia with talent. And he said, we've got to fix it. Now, you'll hear me say a lot between now and September before they kick it off again, that on paper, you'll hear me say that a lot on paper. On paper right now, Chris, Ole Miss has absolutely stocked its roster with much better talent to make a run in 24, specifically on defense. And now I really think John Saunders Jr. coming back to defensive back is huge news for Ole Miss. But you talked about Iman Yellen, who's a great player, who Ole Miss has got the number one defensive end, the number one defensive tackle out of the portal ranked by our friends at 24/7 Sports. And Walter Nolan coming in, we saw pictures of him moving into Oxford. Everything appears good there. Tyler Barron, who was recruited heavily because his brother or his stepbrother went and had some family going to Louisville. Ole Miss shoved those guys off. They lost to McDonald to the portal to Louisville, but they did keep Tyler Barron, who they really needed him. Not to mention J.J. Pegues, the talented defensive tackle, transfer out of Auburn, is coming back. You've got Jared Ivey, who has been huge at defensive end. But linebacker, you just named it. I think Pooh Paul is one of the better tacklers that's going to be on this roster. You put him alongside son Terry Perkins, who was a former five-star at Raleigh High School in Mississippi, who was swimming a little bit last year. He's a true freshman and played pretty good, but when it got kind of to the SEC action and you started game playing against Carson Beck and some of those better quarterbacks in the SEC, he was swimming a little bit, but he's only going to continue to get better. And so I think that says a lot about the staff and about Pete Golding and what he was able to do to really circumvent a defense. And now you throw in those new transfer portal pieces. Ole Miss is going to have one of the better defensive line classes in the SEC. And once again, Chris, defensively, the best collection of talent in the history of Ole Miss football. Now, we could argue what that means because they haven't been defensive so to speak, over the years. But without question, the best collection of talent on defense, and I would argue on offense as well, specifically at wide receiver in the history of the program.
Yeah, Brad, I was going to ask, where does Juice Wells fit into the equation? Because obviously last year with South Carolina, he battled the injuries, and there was some speculation. Could he have played in the final few games? Could he not? Whatever. That's kind of beside the point. But it's like, where does he fit in? Because I think all of a sudden Juice Wells goes from being, no-brainer wide receiver one in Columbia to he's really fighting for reps, which is a good thing, though. I mean, iron sharpens iron, and you mentioned who's going to replace Quinshon Judkins, but I mean, Ole Miss is loaded everywhere else, led by Jackson Dart. And of course, like we mentioned, he's got a fantastic group of receivers and Prescore in the tight end, I believe you mentioned, right? He's back also in 2024.
Well, the good thing about Ole Miss is you're going to go 8-10 deep at wide receiver. And now that if you, for example, run Deion Smith, the number one JUCO player in the country who's coming to Ole Miss, he runs a go route and he can just roll off the field, and then you roll in Juice Wells. So I think just having 8 to 10 deep of just absolute burners is going to be key. Jordan Watkins is coming back, the wide receiver has pointed out he's coming back along with Deion Smith. And Marquise Willis is someone that nobody knows about. But he's Malik Willis's brother, who was quarterback for the Titans. He played at a small Kahoma, if I can say it right, Kahoma Community College down the road in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and nobody knows about him. But he's got a great speed, and so he's definitely someone to look for. But Juice Wells is someone that Ole Miss got on early when he got in the portal. There were some questions about his leg, about his ankle, about if he was going to be 100%. Ole Miss liked their opportunities with him, so he's coming in, and it's going to be an electric wide receiving core for sure. Hey, real quick, Chris, let me say this about running back. I appreciate you bringing up Logan Diggs. He is the transfer, started out at Notre Dame, went to LSU. He's now coming to Oxford. We have been told there could be a pretty difficult injury to his knee. So there's a chance that Ole Miss will not be able to get him until the somewhat midway part of the season. So that's definitely something to monitor. But I appreciate you pointing that out. Ole Miss will have running back depth in the back half of that secondary with Logan Diggs, who's a very good running back out of LSU.
Yeah, Brad, you've been working in the portal when Logan Diggs is just kind of an under-the-radar pickup, if you will. And on that note, Brad, if you had to pick one, I'm going to put you on the spot. Of all these portal guys, who do you think, when it's all said and done, will be the biggest difference maker? Is there one guy you look at like, that's going to be the guy right there that's the anchor of this thing or makes this thing go or has the best season, if you will? There's so many candidates, right? Because there's so many quality players been added. But is there one guy that, whether when he was added or now, you look upon and you say, that was the big one that Ole Miss locked down?
I think at the end of the year, you're going to look back and say Walter Nolan was a great player. Princely Umanellan is an incredible defensive end. But at the end of the day, I think Pooh Paul is going to be the player that Ole Miss looks back and says, that's the best guy we got, because I think he's going to lead the team in tackles. I think there's a chance he could lead the team in sacks. I think he's a phenomenal linebacker out of Arkansas, and I think he's going to be the player that Ole Miss looks back and says, I sure am glad we got him on our team.
Brad, before we get you out of here, let's talk Chris Beard's program. It's been, I feel like, a magical season in Oxford on the hardwood, right? When you look at expectations, and obviously Chris Beard has won everywhere he has been, but thus far, I don't think anybody saw this coming, right? Ole Miss over the weekend, they beat Vandy. They had that nice bounce back win after a really tough, first SEC game against Tennessee, who's one of the best teams in the country. They beat Florida by a wide margin. Just your overall impressions and thoughts on what Chris Beard is doing in year one.
People on the bench are wearing shirts that say culture. There are different people in student section that have shirts that say culture. Ole Miss, really since 2012, with Andy Kennedy when they won the SEC championship and beat Florida, and then made it somewhat of a run in the SEC, not very far. The furthest Ole Miss has been in the Sweet 16, that was back under Rob Evans back in 1998. So there has been no basketball quote unquote culture, and just giving a shot of enthusiasm into a fan base that absolutely loves its football. Let's be honest, and not also a program that has to compete with baseball, who is a couple years removed from a national championship. But Chris Beard has just come in, completely turned the roster on its head, went to the portal, went to the high school ranks, and now has a collection of talent with a couple of transfers in. Jason Flanagan's son has come in and played very, very well. And then you've also got a couple of big guys, and then you've got Matthew Morrell, who's been lights out shooting the basketball. Jamin Brakefield, also the transfer from Duke, the Mississippi product, has really played well for Ole Miss down the stretch. And now all of a sudden you look, they've only got one or two losses, and they're in really good here early on in the SEC. They've got everybody's attention. They had a big win over Vandy the other night. It was a really nice crowd. And I think Ole Miss is a team to watch without question. The key to me is if they can go 10-8 in the conference. I think they're an 8, maybe a 7 seed. 9-9, win a game or two in the SEC tournament. I think they're easily in. But just win a couple of games on the road, win your home games, and that's the key for Ole Miss to make the NCAA tournament. A team that has not made the tournament very much in the program's history. So what Chris Beard has done has been phenomenal to watch in just a short period of time.
Brad Logan, one of the best in the business when it comes to covering the Ole Miss Rebels. Brad, we're just nearly a month away from opening day, my friend. Let's get you back on the show to talk all things Ole Miss baseball here in the near future. But, my man, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate all your great work.
Absolutely. Thanks, and best of luck to you too, Chris.
Okay, that was Brad Logan. Always great stuff, sitting down, chopping it up with Brad, talking all things Ole Miss Rebels. And y'all be sure to go follow his work, man. Does a really, really good job talking all things Ole Miss. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, is it time to hit the panic button in Tuscaloosa, or is it too early? Is there reason for hope? Is there reason for optimism? We sit down and simply just assess the situation. That is for Kalen DeBoer as a new era begins for Alabama football. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to SEC Unfiltered Live.
Yo, you think Dallas' Power 4 gonna drop 30 tomorrow?
Boy, you tripping.
Did you see his mom made a post about going to the game?
What? Hold up. His mama gonna be there?
He's been averaging like 34 points a game when she's there.
At least 40 when she be on that Jumbotron.
He don't like to let his mama down.
Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Cash in on your sports fandom with Prize Picks.
SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. And when you do, use the promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the simplest fantasy game on the market, focused around prop total entries. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. Prize Picks has no sharks, optimizers, or mass multi-entry. It's literally just you against the projection. They also allow mixed sport entry. So, for example, you can take the over on LeBron, parlay with the under on Mahomes. They've got college sports, pro sports, literally anything and everything you can think of. They have got it over at Prize Picks. They also have a slick, easy-to-use mobile app, both on the App Store and Google Play, and they're rated 4.8 stars in the App Store with rave reviews. So many fans and listeners of SEC Unfiltered have made tons of money with our friends at Prize Picks, and you should as well. So again, go download the Prize Picks app or head over to prizepicks.com, and when you do, use that promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. We're also brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. When your money's on the line, choose a trusted sports book that gives you tools to win, like MyBookie. At MyBookie, it doesn't matter if your team is up or down. You can easily cash out or bet the game live to come out on the winning side. Use MyBookie for daily odds boosts, same-game parlays, and take advantage of huge prize pool contests. Every single sack, fumble, and touchdown is another chance to hit payday. To get started, go to mybookie.ag, and on your first deposit, use promo code SECU to grab a deposit match up to $1,000. Try the MyBookie money bag as well to grab a potential Super Bowl frontrunner at long shot odds, plus 38,000 on the Eagles and Chiefs. You won't find odds like that anywhere else. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Finally, SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Roback. Guys, if you haven't heard of Roback before, it's time to check them out. It's safe to say I'd bet on these guys any day of the week because I absolutely love their gear. I couldn't be more pumped to work with Roback. It's simply some of the most comfortable gear that I own. From the performance polos to the hoodies and the joggers, it's some of the best fit and best feel around. Roback's performance hoodies are some of the best pieces of clothing I've ever worn. I can't emphasize how soft these things are with great stretch and breathability. They're simply some of the best hoodies out there. Odds are, guys, if you see me during football season, baseball season, basketball season, or just here on SEC Unfiltered Live, you'll more than likely see me in a Roback hoodie. Secondly, guys, Roback's performance polos, they're some of the most comfortable polos out there. They're moisture wicking with 4-way stretch, making them perfect for a game day, and they have the perfect fit. With crisp collars that don't lose their shape, I could not recommend these polos more. In all honesty, guys, Roback's been gaining traction big time. I'm sure you've seen them. They've been working with some of college football's biggest stars, such as Alabama's quarterback Jalen Milroe and former LSU head coach Ed Orgeron. So go check them out now and use the promo code SECU on Roback.com for a generous 20% off your first order. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. 20% off all bottoms, Q-zips, hoodies, and more with the promo code SECU. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, January the 18th, 2024. I want to once again say thank you to our good friend Brad Logan of Inside the Rebels, all the great work that he does, multiple podcasts, all kinds of written content, all about the Ole Miss Rebels. Again, really, really do appreciate a guy like Brad taking the time to chat. And you heard me tease there at the end of the conversation. Very, very good chance we will be getting Brad Logan back on the show to talk all things Ole Miss baseball here in the coming weeks. Again, guys, thank you all so much for being here. Be sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Check out the podcast that drops every single day and follow us on social media wherever you get your content, of course. Also, guys, continue to leave us your questions, your comments, and your calls at 843-790-3377. You can comment on Facebook. You can comment on YouTube. You can comment on Twitch, wherever you are, or you can text that number, 843-790-3377. I want to hear from you. We'll get into all those questions. End of show, last 30 minutes or so in our daily mailbag segment. Guys, with that being said, panic has officially set in for Alabama football fans. Was out and about running some errands this morning and thought, let me tune in and get a gauge of how fans of the Crimson Tide, those who cover the program, just those on the ground in Tuscaloosa, what's the vibe like and the energy like? Tuned into a couple different Alabama podcasts this morning, a couple different Alabama shows, talking about the latest with the portal and things happening. And folks, some are taking it in stride. Some are okay. Most, from what I've seen and heard, unraveling at the seams. And I partly can't blame them for all of the change and everything that's happened. Guys, here's what's gone down for the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's crazy to think Nick Saban His retirement was announced just over a week ago. 8 days ago is when we found out that Nick Saban would be hanging it up and the coaching search officially began. And then, of course, on Friday afternoon is when Kalen DeBoer was hired. Now, we talked about this yesterday, guys. Both Caleb Downs and while we were on air, Caden Proctor, the big offensive lineman, the big offensive tackle, a guy that was not great early in the season last year for the Crimson Tide, but obviously came on, was a starter as a true freshman, started in the college ball playoff in the Rose Bowl. Huge kid, right? Mountain of a man, 6'8", 350, something like that. He entered the portal while we were on air yesterday as well. And that has been a theme for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, guys, you can say that the portal needs to be changed, needs to be fixed, NIL, it's doing this to college football, that to college football. But, guys, the reality is what it is. What we've got right now in college football is what we've got, right? And I'll also say this on a bit of a side note, because I'm seeing a lot of people saying, man, this is unfair. Like, the 30 – you don't think players should have the opportunity to leave if the coach they came to play for gets fired or retires or whatever it is? If that coach is no longer in place, you don't think players should have a window that allow them to reassess their options and reassess their future? I mean, that to me is crazy. I have no problem. I mean, if you want to make it a 14-day window instead of a 30-day window, which is what Alabama football players have to enter the transfer portal, if you want to make it a 14-day window, that's fine. Guys, I don't think it's going to change anything. You could make it a 7-day window. Guys are just going to act much quicker. So I have no problem with, you know what? Nick Saban steps down. There's a lot of players on that Alabama roster that came to play for Nick Saban. That's why they chose Alabama. I know Bama fans want to believe, and Alabama is a great program. They were a great program before Nick Saban. Let's not get it twisted, right? 18 total national titles. Nick Saban won a third, which is crazy to think about. A third of the national championships in Tuscaloosa. But still, they had 12 titles before he got there, right? So this is a great program, make no mistake. But when it comes to recruiting and it comes to relationships and it comes for, I want to play for the best coach of all time, that's why a lot of those guys went there. Guys that could have went to Georgia, could have went to Ohio State, could have went to LSU, could have went anywhere in college football. So I want to go ahead and point that, like, I just think the pushback of like, see, this is what's wrong with college football. Like, Nick Saban retired. Those kids absolutely should have the opportunity to go somewhere else. Now, if you want to say they shouldn't be able to transfer within the conference or like, I totally get that. I think that actually would be a good rule. But if a coach leaves, gets fired, whatever, you got to give people the opportunity to make a choice that's best for their future. And that's what's happening in Tuscaloosa, folks. 28 players. At the time that I'm saying this right now, because who knows? This number very well could increase. I expect it to increase for what it's worth. 28 players from the two deep, from the Alabama two deep, 28 players have entered or are reported to enter the transfer portal. 28 players from the two deep depth chart, guys. That is insane. And more than 24 players, more than 24 have entered since Nick Saban's retirement last week. There's also been 6 decommitments from the 2024-2025 recruiting classes. And we're talking, guys, 5-star prospects. We're talking elite level talent. Oh, by the way, a lot of those transfer portal guys, they found homes, guys. I mean, Caleb Downs, he's either going to go to Georgia, Ohio State, and if I had to bet on it, I think he's probably going to go to Georgia. Des Ricks has gone to Texas A&M. Isaiah Bond went to Texas. I forget his name, but they had a defensive back go to Auburn. You know it's bad when you're losing a player to Auburn. That doesn't happen for Alabama. Also, guys, there's more rumors, like I mentioned, of more guys entering the transfer portal. I think we'd be naive to believe there isn't more on the way. Rumors of the great running back Justice Haynes. That's a name that I've heard floated around. Bama folks are talking about, could he enter the transfer portal? Apparently, Justice Haynes and Caleb Downs were really tight, really close, really good friends. May he enter the portal as well? And so, the beginning of the Kalen DeBoer era, guys, you look at the hirings, right? This is a staff, a coaching staff that Kalen DeBoer's put together. Tons of upside. I love the Ryan Grubb hire at OC. I really believe that creativity offensively, what he's got with Jalen Miller. And Bama got a big boost. Couple guys have announced they're coming back. If they ain't wearing crimson, F them, right? But the staff, there's questions about, can they recruit? Can they win in the portal? Guys that don't have SEC ties, don't have SEC experience. And I'm not saying that's a reason they're gonna fail or succeed. I'm just pointing it out. There's as much uncertainty with Alabama football right now as there's been in over 20 years. There's as much uncertainty and angst when it comes to Alabama football as there's been since the mid-2000s. I mean, guys, like I mentioned, you know how you know you're old? Are you old enough to remember when Alabama football stunk? And I, for one, am old enough to remember that. Like I've mentioned, guys, I remember back in 2004 when South Carolina went to Tuscaloosa, beat Alabama like a drum at their place. Literally, they showed a shot at the beginning of the fourth quarter of the stands emptying in Tuscaloosa. I'm old enough to remember when Bama was no good. I guess that's how you know you're old. But as much concern as there was during that era with Mike Shula and Brody Croyle, right, who recalls him? That's kind of where we are right now with Alabama football. And the reason why, guys, and I asked this, is it too early to hit the panic button? Should Alabama fans be panicking? Is it too early? It probably is, guys, because here's the thing. I do think this has the ability. I don't think dominoes are done falling when it comes to craziness in college football this offseason, right? Jim Harbaugh still got a decision to make. After that happens, whoever takes over the job at Michigan, may it be Brian Kelly, may it be someone else, but whoever takes over that job, that roster is going to have 30 days to hit the portal and go somewhere else. So, there's going to be talent out there. There's going to be talent available. And I still have to believe there are players who, even though Nick Saban's not there are players who want to go play for that Alabama A. There are players who want to go play for that program. But in regards to, if I'm a Bama fan right now, I am in a panic. If I am a Bama fan right now, I am greatly concerned. I am worried because my norm of a college football fan, my norm of being a college football fan has been completely disrupted. All I'm accustomed to, if I was a Bama fan, is Alabama running college football. Running college football. Getting the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that exists anymore, guys. I don't think that exists anymore. I think without Nick Saban, the uncertainty that surrounds the program, I just don't think that exists anymore. And you think about it, the one piece of armor that I think was protecting Alabama from allowing Georgia to take over as that premier program was Nick Saban. So I don't think the Alabama football program is here's the thing. If your expectation is for it to be exactly the same as it was under Nick Saban, that's a you thing. You're setting unfair expectations. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a very, very harsh reality that many Alabama folks are not ready for. So, is it too early to hit the panic button? Maybe it is, but it is justifiable. It is justifiable because there is as much uncertainty. There are as many question marks. There's as much angst surrounding Alabama football as there has been in over 20 years. And it's a rocky start to the Kalen DeBoer era. And I mean, it's one of those things, guys. You know what's crazy is like Kalen DeBoer has this great track record and this and that, whatever. But I think the uncertainty of just like not being an SEC guy, not even being an East Coast guy, not being a Southeast guy. And so many of these Alabama players, they probably look at it and say, man, I could have went to Georgia, played for Kirby. Because effectively now, guys, Nick Saban is gone. Kirby Smart's the best coach in college football. Like, the biggest adjustment for Alabama fans is having very uncomfortable conversations. That's one of the biggest adjustments. It's an uncomfortable conversation to admit Georgia, all of a sudden, the path is cleared for the Bulldogs. It's an uncomfortable conversation to admit that now Georgia has the best head coach in college football with Kirby Smart. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have that all of a sudden Alabama no longer has this chokehold on the SEC. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have that the aura of Nick Saban can no longer bail out Alabama from maybe, let's say, losing an NIL battle or swaying a kid one way or another because, hey, we may not have this or that, but we have Nick Saban, which was always going to come out on top. A lot of uncomfortable conversations are having to be had by Alabama faithful. Now, what does it say about Bama football? Still think it's a great program, guys. It's still one of the upper echelons of all of college football. But Kalen DeBoer is in a tough spot. Kalen DeBoer is in a very, very tough spot. Because the growing pains are inevitable. Like, they're going to happen. You know, I know Nick Saban's still there in the building or what have you. He's got an office. Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. But this level of turnover with a brand new coaching staff, I mean, I'm not trying to go, adjust way too early record predictions or whatever. I'm not trying to sit here and say Alabama's going to go 6-6 this year. But I can tell you this. I picked Bama in my way too early record predictions to go 11-1. One of the reasons was this. Hey, I doubted the GOAT and I was wrong. I'm not doing it again. Guys, with a different head coach, I really genuinely believe with a different head coach, 2023 Alabama does go 9-3. They might go 8-4 with a different head coach. So now you look at 2024. I had Alabama 11-1. Way too early predictions. You know why? It's not because I think Jalen Milroe is going to turn into an All-American quarterback. It's not because all of a sudden Georgia falls off the schedule or Alabama's going to be, that offensive line is going to become all of a sudden the best O-line in college football. It was because of Nick Saban. It was because, hey, you know what? Saban's going to figure it out. And now you no longer have that. I'm absolutely picking Georgia to beat Bama in Tuscaloosa. I'm absolutely picking that. I had Alabama beating Georgia before. You know why? Not because I don't think Georgia's a more talented team or a better team, because they had Saban. And Georgia could not beat Saban for whatever reason. So I think trying times are ahead in Tuscaloosa. I'm not saying Alabama's going to go 6-6. I'm not saying they're even going to miss the college football playoff. But uncomfortable conversations are going to become the norm in Tuscaloosa if they have not already become so. And in this world of college football in this era, with NIL, the portal, guess what, guys? The playing field, it's not perfect, right? There's still disparity between top and bottom, but the playing field's getting leveled out. The playing field is evening to a degree. We're seeing it with the portal. We're seeing it with Bama, this mass exodus. Bama's having to face these realities head on right now, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, horns down. Is it a classless gesture or a harmless attempt at celebration and trolling? We'll talk about that all more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to SEC Unfiltered live.
Yo, you think Dallas' Power 4 gonna drop 30 tomorrow?
Boy, you tripping.
Did you see his mom made a post about going to the game?
What? Hold up. His mama gonna be there?
He's been averaging like 34 points a game when she's there.
At least 40 when she be on that Jumbotron.
He don't like to let his mama down.
Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Cash in on your sports fandom with Prize Picks.
SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. And when you do, use the promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the simplest fantasy game on the market, focused around prop total entries. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. Prize Picks has no sharks, optimizers, or mass multi-entry. It's literally just you against the projection. They also allow mixed sport entry. So, for example, you can take the over on LeBron, parlay with the under on Mahomes. They've got college sports, pro sports, literally anything and everything you can think of. They have got it over at Prize Picks. They also have a slick, easy-to-use mobile app, both in the App Store and Google Play, and they're rated 4.8 stars in the App Store with rave reviews. So many fans and listeners of SEC Unfiltered have made tons of money with our friends at Prize Picks, and you should as well. So again, go download the Prize Picks app or head over to prizepicks.com, and when you do, use that promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. We're also brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. When your money's on the line, choose a trusted sports book that gives you tools to win, like MyBookie. At MyBookie, it doesn't matter if your team is up or down. You can easily cash out or bet the game live to come out on the winning side. Use MyBookie for daily odds boosts, same-game parlays, and take advantage of huge prize pool contests. Every single sack, fumble, and touchdown is another chance to hit payday. To get started, go to mybookie.ag, and on your first deposit, use promo code SECU to grab a deposit match up to $1,000. Try the MyBookie money bag as well to grab a potential Super Bowl frontrunner at long shot odds, plus 38,000 on the Eagles and Chiefs. You won't find odds like that anywhere else. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Finally, SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Roback. Guys, if you haven't heard of Roback before, it's time to check them out. It's safe to say I'd bet on these guys any day of the week because I absolutely love their gear. I couldn't be more pumped to work with Roback. It's simply some of the most comfortable gear that I own. From the performance polos to the hoodies and the joggers, it's some of the best fit and best feel around. Roback's performance hoodies are some of the best pieces of clothing I've ever worn. I can't emphasize how soft these things are with great stretch and breathability. They're simply some of the best hoodies out there. Odds are, guys, if you see me during football season, baseball season, basketball season, or just here on SEC Unfiltered Live, you'll more than likely see me in a Roback hoodie. Secondly, guys, Roback's performance polos, they're some of the most comfortable polos out there. They're moisture wicking with 4-way stretch, making them perfect for a game day, and they have the perfect fit. With crisp collars that don't lose their shape, I could not recommend these polos more. In all honesty, guys, Roback's been gaining traction big time. I'm sure you've seen them. They've been working with some of college football's biggest stars, such as Alabama's quarterback Jalen Milroe and former LSU head coach Ed Orgeron. So go check them out now and use the promo code SECU on Roback.com for a generous 20% off your first order. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. 20% off all bottoms, Q-zips, hoodies, and more with the promo code SECU. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, January the 18th, 2024. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Guys, I may run, before we go any further, I may run an experiment, and we may make this a segment on tomorrow's show. Not trying to start an argument of any sort, but I'm just genuinely curious to hear from the audience, because I'm a huge baseball guy, right? And I just dropped a graphic for my projected Omaha 8, if you will, right away too early, or just an early prediction, whatever. And the feedback on it has been incredible, right? The number of views or reposts or what have you. I'm just curious, and you guys can, and we'll probably post something separate on social media, because I want to, give an opportunity for folks to voice their opinions or whatever. I'm just curious, what do you think is the more popular sport in the SEC? Basketball or baseball? And some may scoff at that, but I really genuinely believe it's a conversation. I really genuinely believe there's an argument to be had. And if it's basketball or you think it's baseball, like, how wide is the gap? So we all know football is king. What's the second most popular sport in the SEC? Is it basketball or is it baseball? I'm really curious, and I'm really excited, obviously, to cover the SEC baseball season. Love covering basketball too, but I'm really, really curious to see what the numbers and the feedback is like during baseball season. I think it's going to be great. I asked because, again, the passion of SEC baseball fans, it truly feels unmatched, and it makes me feel like baseball's got an argument. Again, I think I may take the responses, make that a segment on tomorrow's show. I think that'd be a fun conversation as opening day approaches, if you will. So, anyways, guys, we keep the conversation rolling here on this Thursday. What do y'all think? It's no hate, Texas, but what's the big deal with this? Apparently, Rodney Terry has a issue, right, with the horns down. A huge issue with it. And it raises the question, am I classless for throwing horns down? Or is it just a fun celebration, gesture, whatever? Well, Texas coach Rodney Terry, he took some serious offense to this. Texas, by the way, has lost 3 of their first 4 games in Big 12 play, right? Because this is their last year in the Big 12, still in Big 12. They've lost 3 of their first 4 games in Big 12 play. And last night, Texas falls to UCF on their home floor. UCF players, immediately following the game, like so many teams do, started throwing horns down. Horns down, baby, horns down. Started throwing the horns down. And Rodney Terry, again, took major exception to this, yelling at UCF players. That's classless. That's classless. We don't do that. That's classless. Don't do that shit, was the direct quote. In the postgame, Rodney Terry came out and said, quote, "I'm a big believer in you win the right way, you lose the right way. You carry yourself the right way. You don't go through the handshake line or prior to getting to the handshake line and have about 6 or 7 guys putting horns down. We don't do that." He continued and said, "When you do those things or kind of things, it looks very classless, and it also looks like you were just hoping to win. We never go into games hoping to win. We go into games expecting to win. So we don't act like that. We expect to win." There's a lot to unpack here. From Rodney Terry, who it seems to me like was upset about the loss, saw UCF's team celebrating, and took out his frustrations on them. I'll first say this. Rodney Terry, this is a message from me to you. And I got nothing against you. I got nothing against Texas. Got a couple friends that are Texas fans. Have had nothing but great interactions. Love that Texas is coming to the SEC. But Rodney Terry, what I would tell you is this. My friend, you are in for one rude awakening in the Southeastern Conference. You may not have to worry about players doing it, but I tell you what, every student section you go up against and every fan base practically that you go up against is going to give you relentless hell. Straight up just hell, right? And you go back to these quotes from Rodney Terry. Here's my thing. Why are you talking about what the other team's doing? Why don't you worry about your team and not playing well enough to win games? You don't do that. We don't do that. Well, you don't do that, but they wanted to do it. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-old college kids. You win a big game, and his comments very much so just sounded like, paraphrasing, act like you've been there before. So do you want to just take all the joy and the excitement out of winning? Winning is fun. Celebrate the victories, big and small. Winning is very, very fun. You should be able to celebrate those victories. And I don't think you should have to apologize for it. And I really, really hope UCF's head coach does not come out and make an apology. If I was the UCF head coach, they asked me, hey, what'd you think about these comments? I would just say, hey, listen, we won a big game. Our guys celebrated, and that's it. Next question. Like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Rodney Terry, that skin better thicken up, my friend, because SEC fans, it's only going to get worse. And guys, in my opinion, and I think it's so silly that like horns down is flagged. Like any of this stuff is flagged. I'm not saying like there's a line, but why? Like here's the thing. Then just get rid of the entire hand signal. A Texas guy should not be able to, after he scores a touchdown, for example, he should not be able to throw the horns up if an opponent can't score and throw the horns down. You cannot have it both ways. Right? Why can a Florida player do the Gator chomp after a score if an opponent can't hit him with that right there, the throat slash? I mean, there's other things. The tomahawk chop with FSU. I've seen people do Spurs down for South Carolina, right? Instead of Spurs down. Bro, it's sports. Let's have a little fun. Let's lighten up. Let's loosen up. And Rodney Terry, you might want to toughen up, my man, because it's only going to get worse when Texas comes to the SEC. Maybe not with players. Maybe not. Maybe not. But I'm sure there's a lot of players in the SEC that, you know, and it may not be a premeditated thing, but I'm sure there's a lot of players in the SEC that are like, man, I can't wait to throw the horns down, man. We're going to throw horns down. We win. Like, it's just a natural reaction. So, Texas folks, listen, and I know it gets on your nerves, Texas folks. I love you. Happy to have you in the SEC. But Rodney Terry specifically, buckle up. Buckle up. Because SEC fans, they are relentless. And it will be unlike anything Rodney Terry or his team have ever experienced. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll talk some men's basketball on that note, guys. Vegas, shocker, was right. Vegas was right, guys. We'll touch on the action last night. Then we'll get into your questions, your comments, and your calls in our daily mailbag segment. Guys, all that and more on the side of this break. You're tuned in to SEC Unfiltered live.
Yo, you think Dallas' Power 4 gonna drop 30 tomorrow?
Boy, you tripping.
Did you see his mom made a post about going to the game?
What? Hold up. His mama gonna be there?
He's been averaging like 34 points a game when she's there.
At least 40 when she be on that Jumbotron.
He don't like to let his mama down.
Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Cash in on your sports fandom with Prize Picks.
SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. And when you do, use the promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the simplest fantasy game on the market, focused around prop total entries. You pick 2 to 6 players, and you can win up to 10 times on an entry. Prize Picks has no sharks, optimizers, or mass multi-entry. It's literally just you against the projection. They also allow mixed sport entry. So, for example, you can take the over on LeBron, parlay with the under on Mahomes. They've got college sports, pro sports, literally anything and everything you can think of. They have got it over at Prize Picks. They also have a slick, easy-to-use mobile app, both in the App Store and Google Play, and they're rated 4.8 stars in the App Store with rave reviews. So many fans and listeners of SEC Unfiltered have made tons of money with our friends at Prize Picks, and you should as well. So again, go download the Prize Picks app or head over to prizepicks.com, and when you do, use that promo code SECU to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. We're also brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. When your money's on the line, choose a trusted sports book that gives you tools to win, like MyBookie. At MyBookie, it doesn't matter if your team is up or down. You can easily cash out or bet the game live to come out on the winning side. Use MyBookie for daily odds boosts, same-game parlays, and take advantage of huge prize pool contests. Every single sack, fumble, and touchdown is another chance to hit payday. To get started, go to mybookie.ag, and on your first deposit, use promo code SECU to grab a deposit match up to $1,000. Try the MyBookie money bag as well to grab a potential Super Bowl frontrunner at long shot odds, plus 38,000 on the Eagles and Chiefs. You won't find odds like that anywhere else. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Finally, SEC Unfiltered Live is brought to you by our friends over at Roback. Guys, if you haven't heard of Roback before, it's time to check them out. It's safe to say I'd bet on these guys any day of the week because I absolutely love their gear. I couldn't be more pumped to work with Roback. It's simply some of the most comfortable gear that I own. From the performance polos to the hoodies and the joggers, it's some of the best fit and best feel around. Roback's performance hoodies are some of the best pieces of clothing I've ever worn. I can't emphasize how soft these things are with great stretch and breathability. They're simply some of the best hoodies out there. Odds are, guys, if you see me during football season, baseball season, basketball season, or just here on SEC Unfiltered Live, you'll more than likely see me in a Roback hoodie. Secondly, guys, Roback's performance polos, they're some of the most comfortable polos out there. They're moisture wicking with four-way stretch, making them perfect for a game day, and they have the perfect fit. With crisp collars that don't lose their shape, I could not recommend these polos more. In all honesty, guys, Roback's been gaining traction big time. I'm sure you've seen them. They've been working with some of college football's biggest stars, such as Alabama's quarterback Jalen Milroe and former LSU head coach Ed Orgeron. So go check them out now and use the promo code SECU on Roback.com for a generous 20% off your first order. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. 20% off all bottoms, Q-zips, hoodies, and more with the promo code SECU. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, January the 18th, 2024. Appreciate each and every single one of you being here. Our good friend Slayer of Queens says, need to sell the old TSUS Horns Down merch in 14 of the school colors. Slayer of Queens. That's a great idea. I actually thought of that this morning when I saw the Horns Down thing. So the store is something I'm still working on, guys. We'll probably make that a priority this weekend to get that fired up and get that rolling, guys. We're also adding content contributors and really getting things going here in the early going, if you will. So Slayer of Queen, great idea, though. I think there's 15 fan bases that would be that might find a lot of value in that. probably one in particular that won't like me all that much, but, it is what it is. So, anyways, appreciate you all tuning in, guys. Let's see. Bryce Jeffcoat says, man, Chris must be loving this. I just don't know what Bryce is talking about. I don't know exactly what Bryce is talking about. I'm loving this day, though. I'm loving today. I'm loving the content. I'm loving the banter, guys. We're going to get into your questions, comments, and calls here in just a moment as the Daily Mailbag segment gets going. And I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from you. Let's see. We got spam calls out the wazoo, man. Okay, here we go. I do want to hear from you guys also. We put up a link or put up a post on social media, all across social media. We're probably going to do this more often, too, to take questions from people who maybe can't tune in live, but they want to ask questions. So probably won't do that every single day, but, maybe like 2 days a week or even just 1 day a week. Maybe we start doing a mailbag episode. I think that could be a lot of fun because you guys, I love the fact when the audience gets involved and you guys start sparking conversation with questions and different subject matter you bring up, what have you. So again, guys, continue to leave us those. In the meantime, we're talking SEC basketball. Guys, I've mentioned this many times. They do not build those mansions out in Vegas with winners' money. Now, to be fair, and let's go straight to it, LSU Ole Miss. I told you guys yesterday, spread never made any sense to me. LSU opened as a 1.5-point favorite, and it only increased. At tip-off, LSU was favored by 3.5. And when I made picks in these games, I told you all, hey, I don't get this. But when it feels like it's too easy, it is too easy. Somebody knew something, whether it was about the matchup itself, whether they knew something about, heck, I don't know, an injury report or a certain matchup or just whatever it might be. LSU not only gets the win straight up, which I picked that because, like I said, I was like, I'm not touching the spread, but you know what? I'm picking LSU. I'm not going against Vegas. I'm not doing it. Vegas was right. What do you know? Vegas was right. LSU wins. LSU covers. 89-80. The final score. And guys, get this. With LSU's win, they have now surpassed their SEC win total from last year. Guys, we are 4 games in. And LSU is all of a sudden 3-1 in conference play. They hold Ole Miss to 37% shooting, 25% from 3. LSU, on the flip side, shoots 48%, both from the field and from three-point land. So LSU's offense red hot. A number of different guys contributing. Wright with 27, Cook with 16, Ward with 11, Williams the third with 10. And I know I've said it many times, guys, I sound like a broken record, but I'm just so impressed on a nightly basis at the depth of the SEC. Like, there are so many teams that can sneak up and bite you. There is that elite group, if you will, but after that, the battle for the 4th best team, heck, the battle for the 5th best team is the one that's really crazy. Because I think 4th best, we'd probably sit here and say, okay, Bama's locked that in. 5 through 10, just shuffle them up. 5 through 10, take your pick. So it's incredible on a nightly basis. We just see the depth of this conference. Now, across the league, guys, other happenings. The 2 other games, not really all that close. Kentucky gets a 90-77 win over Mississippi State. Again, Wildcats on the home floor, always felt good about them. Tolu Smith had a good night, 26 points, but he was a one-man show. Next highest score was Fort with 13, and then they didn't have anybody else in double digits. So, for the most part, Mississippi State held down. And, guys, offensively, I think, is where Kentucky continues to be really impressive. Guys, they shot 56% last night. 30 of 54, shot 30% from 3. Only went 7 of 23 from 3. That's the crazy part, though. Normally, they're better than that. but shot 56%. Reeves with 27, Dillingham with 16, Mitchell with 15, Bradshaw with 11. I mean, they're just so deep. They're just so deep, man. So many talented players. They get that double-digit win. And then Auburn goes to Nashville, guys. I picked Auburn. I thought maybe, it can be a tricky game, maybe, just maybe, because Memorial Gymnasium. Auburn had no problems. They didn't care. 80-65, the final in that one. The 13th-ranked Tigers get the W. Fire Jerry Stackhouse watch is officially on. I know our folks in Nashville are ready to see that era end. The offensive side, though, for Auburn, fantastic. 47% from the field, 32% from three. Williams with 21 points, Broom with 15, Cardwell with 12, Holloway with 10. They had three guys with 5 points apiece. So really spread the basketball out well. A lot of different guys making a big-time impact. And then you look at Vanderbilt, shot just 38% from the field, 22% from three. The struggles continue for Jerry Stackhouse's team. So, not a lot of drama, guys, last night on the hardwood. And I think what's interesting, guys, is we turn our attention now. We're still early on, right? We're still pretty early on. But as you look at the standings, I think the standings are a really good reflection of when we talk about power rankings or what have you, like where we are right now in the SEC. You've got Bama at the top. You've got Auburn at the top. You've got Kentucky at the top. You've got Tennessee at the top, right? Those all make sense. Like I mentioned, guys, the depth of the league. Beyond that, I mean, you go to the bottom. Vandy's at 0-4 in conference play. Missouri is at 0-4 in conference play, right? I think those two teams have established themselves. The bottom both have lost 4 in a row. I mean, guys, Texas A&M's 1-3. They're as dangerous as anybody. Arkansas is 1-3. Did they just find new life in beating Texas A&M? Florida's 1-3. I mean, I think their schedule's been pretty difficult, and they're a solid basketball team. Mississippi State is 1-3, and their one win came against the Tennessee Volunteers, a top 5 team in the country. South Carolina and Ole Miss, both 2-2. I'm really curious, guys, of those two programs, of Ole Miss and South Carolina. Which of those two, like if you had to buy stock in one right now for this season, who would you buy stock in? Who would you buy stock in if you had to pick Ole Miss or South Carolina? I mean, I think the easy answer is Ole Miss just because they have Chris Beard, right? And Chris Beard is a winner. He's a proven winner everywhere he goes. That being said, I like South Carolina, a veteran ball club, right? A lot of veteran guys they got from the portal. It's year 2 of Lamont Paris instead of year 1. South Carolina's got a pivotal game upcoming this weekend against Arkansas. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But both of those teams sit at 2-2. And then the surprises, guys. Georgia at 3-1 in conference play. LSU at 3-1. Can those two teams, can they sustain that? I mean, I feel like that top 4 of Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, and Alabama, I think that's going to be your top 4 all year. I think that is a tier in itself, right? And I think your bottom tier, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and depending on Saturday, Arkansas could be down there. But because of the talent they have, I think that's why you probably keep them out. So you've got Mizzou and Vandy at the bottom. You've got Kentucky, Auburn, Tennessee, and Alabama at the top. So that's 6 teams. So there's 8 teams in the middle of this thing. 8 teams in the middle. And if you factor in, let's say the SEC gets 9 teams in a March Madness, right? You got those 4 at the top. So basically, there's 8 teams fighting for 5 spots, 4 or 5 spots. It's going to be a lot of fun over the coming weeks to see who rises, who falls, right? Because I think you've got a lot of good middle-of-the-pack teams. They may not be elite, but they're dangerous. They can get you on any given night. Who rises to the top? Who falls? Going to be interesting to follow in the coming weeks. Guys, that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Your questions, your comments, your calls, 843-790-3377. That is 843-790-3377 here on this Thursday. We go ahead and dive into it. Bruin Nation says Miami Hurricanes got a tight end coming back for a 9th year. Yes, a 9th year. The same class as Jalen Hurts. Hey, Alex Moran, Blue Mountain State, baby. Alex Moran, Blue Mountain State. Just play as long as you can, man. If they're going to let you come back to campus, play. Why not? Play. Just play. Austin Gregory, this is the first week I have a change in my number 1 power ranked teams in the conference, which has been Tennessee all year. I believe that spot now goes to Auburn. I mean, I think Austin, it's just like, what have they won? 10 games in a row by double digits? At some point, you just got to tip your cap. I mean, Auburn with Bruce Pearl, they are on a roll right now. At some point, just give credit where credit's due. I mean, we're splitting hairs at the top for sure, and I'm happy that we just get to resolve it on the floor, if you will, right? But I think Auburn deserves it, Austin, for sure. I do. Let's see. Let me go back to the beginning of the show here. We've got questions in. Austin Wright says, SECU, let's go. Appreciate you, my friend. Del Rice says, hotty toddy. Caleb says, Lane is my favorite all-time coach at Ole Miss. I could see why. I can see why. Brian Dean says, I think Robbie Ashford was an excellent pickup for South Carolina. Brian, I think Robbie Ashford was the perfect pickup for South Carolina from the standpoint of you get a guy that has played in SEC games, who has won SEC games, who has had success at the SEC level, and I don't think he's expecting to start. That's why it's the perfect pickup. Because Brian Dean, let's call it for what it is. There is no South Carolina fan out there, as crazy as this logic is. And I think it's a mistake. I think this logic's a mistake. If you want my honest opinion, I think this logic is a bit of a mistake. Like, I understand wanting to invest in the guys that you have on the roster, but completely shutting the door on the potential of going out and getting someone, like, for example, a Malik Murphy or whatever quarterback it might be, because, well, we got this freshman that we just really like. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have upside and potential, but you just really like him. That's what it is. So, like, I don't love that logic, but for what South Carolina was looking for, because let's be honest, the Gamecocks were looking for a backup. They didn't want to go out in the portal and get a starter. They didn't want to go out and get in the portal a guy that could even potentially beat out Lenora Sellers. That's not what Gamecock fans wanted. It's just not. And that's a really difficult bag of goods to sell to guys who were in the portal, because more than likely they're leaving because, yeah, they want to get a bag, but they want to play. Probably a lot of them want to play. So, to your point, Brian, I do think Robbie Ashford was the best of that situation, where it's like he has SEC experience. He's obviously got talent. It didn't work out at Auburn, whatever. Maybe he's not a starting quarterback. He doesn't want to go down a level. He's willing to be a backup. So I think it was a perfect fit from that standpoint. I really do. I think it was a perfect fit. But let's just be honest. South Carolina fans never wanted the Gamecocks to go out and get a quarterback. They didn't. Not a legitimate starter. Not a bona fide stud. Just wanted a solid number 2 option. That's it. So it's you know, because here's the thing. If you are entrenched in South Carolina, if you're a diehard, like, you are ecstatic about the Lenora Sellers era. And you should be, right? I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I think people just really still, like, as much as college football has changed and it ever is changing with NIL, the portal, I think it makes folks even more so rally around kids that are local, homegrown, that are theirs, that stay, right? So not only is Lenora Sellers very talented, he's a homegrown guy. He's from the state of South Carolina. He chose to go to South Carolina. Like, your fan base is gonna rally around someone like that more than they ever would anybody else. Even more than a Spencer Rattler, guys, because he was an outsider. Call it for what it is, right? Came via the transfer portal. But it's, from the outside perspective, when you're not seeing it from like the diehard fandom perspective, it's like, man, Shane Beamer comes into a pivotal year, man, year 4. South Carolina is more than happy to put all their eggs in the basket of virtually a true freshman. All the eggs in the basket of a guy who's never had a highlight that did not come against Furman or Vanderbilt. I'm curious to see how it works out. I really am. I'm very, very intrigued to see how it works out for sure. Austin Gregory, if you had to guess, what does the pitching rotation look like this season for South Carolina? I honestly don't know, Austin. I do not know at this point. I really don't. I mean, it's going to be a new look rotation. Can Matthew Becker factor in? Could Eli Jones factor in? He was very, very good for them a season ago. I can tell you this, Austin, it's going to change. Whatever they start out with, it's going to change, right? I mean, last year, South Carolina, we were all convinced that Will Sanders was going to be an All-American, right? Or had that potential. And I mean, heck, he was booted from the rotation halfway through the year. You know what I mean? So you never know. Let's see, guys, going throughout your questions. Let's see. We've got questions. Lots of questions on Facebook. Let me see if I can get into those. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Josh Cuevas on Facebook says, with Caleb Downs looking like he's heading to Georgia, how does he fit in? Is he more of a strong safety who plays in the box and thumps, or a free safety who plays center field and picks off passes? How does he fit in with UGA's other safeties? I mean, I think he can do a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. But here's the beauty of it. Here's the beauty for Caleb Downs. Travaris Robinson is now at Georgia, right? And Kirby, who did he learn under? Nick Saban. Georgia and Bama ran the same, or they run the same defense, or they did run the same defense. So Caleb Downs going to Georgia would make sense for a lot of reasons. That's a big one. That's a big one because it'll be the same defense. He'll be able to adjust and fit in and very seamlessly. So, I think he's a bit of a thumper. I mean, 107 tackles, man, 70 solo last year. I think he's a thumper. We've also seen him in coverage. I think he can do a little bit of everything, but I think he is more that strong safety type of player down there in the box. Let's see. Matt Hemingway on Facebook says, will LSU's new football coaching hires on defense propel them to the top of the SEC in 2024? That's a very, very good question, Matt. I think LSU, they got so much hype coming in this past season. Now, is Garrett Nussmeier going to work, right? Are they going to be able to, is LSU going to be able to run the football without Jaden Daniels carrying the running game? There are valid questions. LSU does return, I would say, one of the best offensive lines in college football. Like Matt mentions, they completely revamped the defensive staff. I think what's fascinating is, now there's no Nick Saban. I think, on a side note, I think Georgia's primed to take over the SEC and sort of separate themselves. Maybe Texas is up there with them. But I tell you the team I think that's going to be slept on, right? We got a long way to go until even we get to the preseason and media days and talking season, if you will. I think the team that's going to most be slept on is LSU. I think LSU 100% is going to be slept on because you lose the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, they lose some legit pieces. You lose the Heisman Trophy winner. You lose Malik Neighbors. Man, LSU, they got to take a huge step back. They got to go 7-5 or 8-4. Like, how in the world can LSU plug and play and replace these guys? And I think that's a fair argument because you replace the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, nobody's going to be able to do what Jaden Daniels did for that team. But Garrett Nussmeier, the plan, I think, is for him to not have to do that. And I think with the addition of Blake Baker, I think the defensive line coach from Texas they hired, who you could argue the best defensive line coach in college football right now, what he did with that Texas front seven. I think LSU's new hires could absolutely propel them to a college football playoff appearance. I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated or win the SEC, but I think in an offseason where we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about the retirement of Nick Saban and what Alabama's going to be, Ole Miss and that hype train, Missouri and their hype train, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma. Where's the conversation for LSU at? And I think a lot of folks are going to look and say, they had their window. They had the Heisman Trophy winner. They couldn't do it. There's no way LSU will be better. And again, maybe folks are right, but I don't think their defensive struggles, I don't think it was a talent issue. I'm not saying it was perfect and like they can bring back that same 11 and a coach is going to change everything, but I think we can all agree LSU had more talent than what they showed in the defensive side last year. And I think Blake Baker is a good fit for that. He knows LSU. He's been at LSU. I think that defense is going to improve immensely. We'll see what Garrett Nussmeier gives the Tigers, who steps up at wide receiver, who steps up at running back. But you got a great offensive line. Nussmeier showed his potential in the bowl game. They feel really good about the running back situation. LSU's got wide receivers. They got dudes on the outside, man. That's not even something to worry about. So I think LSU could be one of the most slept-on teams in the SEC going into 2024. I really do. Continuing through Facebook questions. James Kendall, good friend of the show, says, why does God hate the Gamecocks? The chicken curse. It's alive and well. Tommy Stroman says, why is South Carolina so happy to get the transfer kids from small schools? South Carolina would have never offered these guys out of high school, but now fans think they're gold. Everyone is not a Mario Anderson, and he only stayed a year. Now he is gone. Well, Tommy, here's what I would say, okay? Here's what I would say. What other, like, no matter who you're a fan of, your school picks up a D2 transfer, an Ivy League guy, whoever it is, all right? And let's say you're a South Carolina fan. Let's say you're an LSU fan. Let's say you're an Ole Miss fan. Let's say you're a Missouri fan, a Kentucky fan. I don't care who you are a fan of. The team affiliate sites, 24/7, On3, Rivals, your local newspaper, whatever. Especially those who have subscription services. Let's just take 24/7, On3, and Rivals. When you pay that $9.99 a month, essentially what you are paying for is hope. You're paying for hope. And I've learned this the hard way, guys. You cannot be honest and critical when it comes to recruiting. You can barely do it when it comes to transfer portal. And the irony is that, like, now players are getting paid, so you should be able to be brutally honest. But it's just really typically most of the time not a hill worth dying on, right? So Tommy asked the question, like, why are people so happy getting, why are people getting fired up about getting these FCS transfers, D2? What's the other choice? Right? And if I own a business where I want you to pay a monthly fee for my inside information in my message board, you're not going to keep doing that and renewing if you're not excited, if you're not fired up, right? Trust me, guys, I've seen this firsthand. Business is a lot better when there's hype and there's energy and there's excitement and overall there is hope. these services, they'd be cutting their nose off, spite their face, if, let's say, when, I don't know, Missouri, whoever it is, when the school got a commitment and they had an honest sit down, a critical analysis, said, I think the pickup's okay. Not expecting a whole lot from that kid. You know what, actually, with the limited room they have, don't think it was a great pickup. What was the quarterback's name? The kid from Oklahoma, Bevel? Talk to folks. They don't think he's that good. Waste of a scholarship. Waste of a spot. You're not going to make a lot of friends doing that, number one. And number two, you're not going to get a whole lot of people to sign up for your service or your message board by being that real and honest. Because a lot of people, guys, let's call it for what it is, they don't want honesty. They want to hear what they want to hear, especially if they're paying a monthly fee. Okay? So why are people getting excited over these pickups? Well, what's the alternative? To be miserable 24/7? I mean, it's just like you have to, like, there's three sectors of fandom. There's three sectors of fans. And Brandon, I was just using an example. That was just one I thought of that I got a text when that kid announced his commitment. They were like, bro, I played against this guy in high school. He's terrible, right? So, like, that's just an example. Whatever. I got nothing against the kid. Whatever. Is what it is. Although I don't think he'll ever play. But you got three sectors of fans. You've got the diehards who, it doesn't matter who the school signs, what coach is coaching, they're going to love everything that is the school's colors. Anything the school touches, they will support. It does not matter. Then you've got the doom and gloomers, right? That everything that happens, they're seeing the negative side of it. They only see the negative side. The other side, like I mentioned, the extremists, if you will, they only see the positive side. Everything's great. Everything's on the up and up. They're the fans that for 40 years have been saying, we're going to turn the corner next year. Like, we got the team, like, whatever. Then you got the people in the middle. And they're probably the smallest portion or a smaller portion that are just – actually, I take that back. I don't think so. I think they're actually the largest portion. They're just the large minority. Either way, they're the largest portion that is just realistic. You know, see, good for good, bad for bad, middle for middle, is what it is. No crazy extreme bias one way or the other. And those are the people that I get along with. That I am. That's where I fall. That's where I fall. So anyways, a long-winded answer here, but why are people pumping up these pickups? Well, if you run a business around a certain team, and we could go down a rabbit hole about this, guys, if you want to talk about, see, that's the beauty of the daily mailbag is sometimes I'll get into things that are beyond sports. Sometimes I'll get into things that are business, right? And so what I was about to say is, why are people pumping up these pickups? Because if you run a business that, let's just say, for example, is centered around the South Carolina Gamecocks, like, it would be a very bad business model for the Big Spur or Gamecock Central to come on a show and tell you, hey, you shouldn't be excited about that pickup because it's not that great of a pickup anyways. Versus hyping and pumping up every pickup like they're the next Tom Brady. That's going to get people a lot more fired up. That's going to get people a lot more excited. That's going to get people, and what do people do when they're happy and they're excited and they're motivated? They go sign up for a subscription. They go pay. They spend money. And that, honestly, guys, for me, you know, there are many layers of the motivation factors of business and why we did what we did, but I almost became too objective for my own good. And I really honestly got to a point where I didn't want my opinions and my analysis and everything I said, everything that I created to have this filter of, well, it's coming from this South Carolina lens, this South Carolina scope. I wanted my work to stand on its own merit. This is simply the work of Chris Phillips, the content creator, the entrepreneur. Not, this is the opinion of a Gamecock homer. I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. That's just one of the many, many reasons. But anyways, That's why that hype happens. You're not going to go to a place like the Big Spur, Gamecock, or again, this is for every school. But you're not going to go to a local team site and them, like, from a local team site perspective, guys, whether it's Ole Miss, it's Kentucky, it's like every 5-star is the next greatest player in college football, every 4-star is a stud, every 3-star is a diamond in the rough, and every preferred walk-on is got the potential to be the next Rudy. You know what I mean? Like that's just how it goes. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, you know, you got schools out here that finish in the top 25 in recruiting, and they're 12th in the SEC, and they don't want to hear that they're 12th in the SEC, and that, you know, you probably didn't make a lot of progress in recruiting. Honestly, you kind of just did what you've always done. But that's the truth. That's the reality. And that's what made me so many friends in Gamecock circles back in the day. So, anyways, long-winded answer there, but it's a very multi-layered thing and something you can go in depth on. But yeah, that's why. So that's why. Ethan K in the YouTube chat says, does Archie stay at Texas or does he hit the portal? I'd like to see him start this year. I think he'll stay, Ethan. I think he'll stay. Quinn Ewers is going to be the guy this year, obviously. I think that, you know, I think Archie waits it out one more year. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, like, he could go anywhere, right? For sure. He could go anywhere. But why go somewhere else? And I appreciate the question, Ethan K. But for Archie Manning, why go somewhere else and start over just to end up at the same place? He's going to be the starter next year in 2025. Why? Like, you're in a really, really good situation. Archie Manning's situation is the definition of the grass isn't greener. Like, you're under one of the best offensive minds in Steve Sarkisian. You're on a great team in Texas that's going to be a college football playoff favorite, should make the college football playoff. You're now in the best conference in college football in the SEC. And let's just say you transfer, to Georgia or some other elite program. You just made a lateral move. Like why would you do that? Everything you want is at Texas. Despite the fact you're not going to start this year, that Quinn Ewers is returning. Everything you want's right there. And let's not also ignore he is a Manning. His situation is unusual. It's not like many others. Do we think NIL money is really going to sway Archie Manning? Like, they're well off. So everything Archie Manning wants is right there. I don't see any reason why he would transfer, really, truly, genuinely. So, or Arch Manning. I keep saying Archie. Why am I saying Archie? Arch Manning. Yeah. I guess Ethan K said Archie. That's why I kept saying it. Arch Manning. Yeah. Anyways, got a question on Instagram. This comes from Briggs Paris, our staff writer, Briggs Paris. Auburn fans, relax. I believe y'all have a really good team. LOL. Briggs responding to all those Auburn fans that they didn't take too kindly. They didn't take too kindly to Briggs' analysis of Auburn. So, anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. That is 843-790-3377 here on this Thursday. Guys, you can call that number. You can text that. Excuse me. You can text that number. You can also comment YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, whatever it might be. Bruin Nation says, find some joy. I hear you, Bruin Nation. Find some joy indeed. I have found my joy, my man. I am as joyous as I've ever been in my entire life, my man. I am as joyous as I've ever been. Brandon says, Chris, did you see where Logan Diggs transferred to Ole Miss last week? Brandon, I did. We talked about that with Brad Logan, top of the show. I think it's a good pickup. I mean, I think that it made sense for both parties. Logan Diggs battled some injuries. They had some other guys step up in the running back room. I don't think he was going to be the feature guy. And now Ole Miss had an opening with Quinshon Judkins going to Ohio State. So, I mean, I think it works out for all parties. And, you know, I think Logan Diggs will have success there. So Austin Gregory says, down Starks and Bolden is easily the best trio of safeties in the country. Good luck taking the top off of that defense next year. Yeah, I mean, that would be insane. Truly. That would be insane. Brandon, Chris, besides Rocket Sanders, who obviously starts, who are some other portal guys you could see starting for South Carolina? Yeah, Rocket's going to be the guy at running back. Some of those defensive guys, the Kyle Kennards, the Pitt guy they picked up. They've picked up a couple linebackers as well that I think will start as well. Outside of that, man, I mean, Oscar Attaway at running back is going to play a lot, I think. So, let's see. 29 days, guys. 29 days. 29 days until opening day. Cannot wait. Cannot wait, guys. Cannot wait. How about Vanderbilt getting some good news? Heck, Vandy's having a better week than Alabama. Truly. Diego Pavia, New Mexico State quarterback, who, by the way, beat Auburn, transferring to Vanderbilt. Diego just said, hey, I beat an SEC team. It ain't all that hard. I'll go to the league. I'll go to the SEC. He's like, this is it? Shoot. I got this. No big deal. No big deal. Anyways, guys, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, guys. We have some great conversations lined up, man. Some great interviews that'll be happening over the next couple of weeks, guys, especially as we get closer to opening day. Frank says this: any business that is directly or indirectly connected to a specific program suffers when the team doesn't do well. Not a viable business model. You got the last lifeboat off of the Titanic. I mean, Frank, to your point, and I appreciate the comment. Football, Frank, it's always great to have you. By the way, Frank, we're taking calls again if you ever want to call. Phone lines are back open. No more voicemails, all calls here. But Frank, to your point, that's, when I said it was business, that admittedly is one of the things I was talking about. And it's, and it wasn't jumping ship because, the team was bad. So, dude, I built in the early days my business off the Will Muschamp era. So, don't tell me about staying loyal or jumping ship or whatever it might be. But to your point, Frank, you are right. And I'll take it to this degree. When you are intertwined, when you're connected to a team, right? The ceiling of your business is controlled off of, does that team win or lose? Do they win or do they lose? That's what the ceiling of your business is controlled by. And that's just not a place I was comfortable operating from anymore. And I saw the really harsh realities of that over the last calendar year, right? I saw the great successes of the 2022 calendar year and what that did. I also faced the realities of 2023. So, as you can probably hear, the dog's going crazy. I don't know who is at the door right now, but madness is ensuing. So, got to get on them. Either way. Guys, that being said, we're going to go and get out of here. That we got an interview at 2 anyways, and I'm going to see what they're going crazy about. So anyways, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content. Also, the podcast drops every day, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Like I mentioned, we got an interview upcoming at 2 anyways. I want to go make sure. I want to see who's at the door, really, truly. Somebody rang the doorbell. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. Stay tuned to YouTube. Stay tuned to the podcast. Social media as well, all across the board. Appreciate you all tuning in, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.